We have next an amazing panel, and then we'll be, after that, gathering for our group photo. Climate is a winning issue for Democrats, and I'm inviting the panel members to come up and join us on stage, and I think fresh water's even been put out for them. I will start with the introductions. Ning, Mosberger-Tang, with a high-tech background, has focused for nearly 20 years on addressing climate change through conservation and mitigation efforts, clean tech investment, policy advocacy, and organizing. She founded the 1.5 Degrees Climate Strategies Group, which is really an innovative donor collaborative, and I've witnessed the profound difference their investments can make. Lodes is the executive director and co-founder of Climate Power, which works to build political will and public support for bold climate action. Lori takes on big fights, and thank you for it, and she wins them. She was one of the organizers who helped to pass the Affordable Care Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And Climate Power, I'm just gonna say personally, it's my go-to place, running an all-volunteer council, to find messaging. They put great stuff out there, great information, great graphics, and I encourage you in your organizations and for your personal use also to go there. Also to the council's website, but so we're really glad that she's here. Jane Fleming Kleeb is, we've heard lots of praise, well-deserved for Jane while we've been here. Grassroots organizer, author, political strategist, nonprofit entrepreneur. Since December 2016, Jane has served as the chair of the mighty Nebraska Democratic Party, and who, by the way, made a lot of big, good noise and did a lot of good dancing last night at the convention. She has years of experience working in rural communities. If you haven't yet, get her book, Harvest the Vote. It had a profound influence on me. I've read it twice now as a person who lives in a rural area and is a farmer. We've got to keep engaging with rural communities. We've got to keep serving rural communities and remember that justice includes rural communities too. She earned the very high honor recently of the Climate Breakthrough Award, which is about the highest award you can get for working on climate change issues. She has a new project, Energy Builders, working with rural communities to bring the economic model of large-scale clean energy projects to benefit the people who live on the land. And I'm just going to say it is super important work. And Frank Houston, it's so good to see a fellow Michigander here. He's the Senior State Policy Manager for Michigan at the BlueGreen Alliance. This first question to Jane. So, but I'm going to encourage you to all, if you feel like it, after Jane answers, jump in and have a conversation. So, do you want to scoot over?
Oh yeah, we can.
Okay. Request for a slight panelist adjustment, which is good. Everyone's got a mic. Everyone's got water. We're good. We're good to go. So we know that climate and environmental justice matter to lots of voters, and it's not just young voters. So how can we use that issue to turn out the vote?
Yeah, such a good question. So, first let me just thank Bill Forsey, who's in the audience. He's a Nebraska Dem, Jose Flores, and Senator McKinney, my good Nebraskans that came to visit and hear. When we often use the word climate, it sometimes alienates voters. And so, my advice is always to find a local issue that's impacting the land, air, and water and start connecting the dots for folks. For us, for example, in Nebraska, we're a big ag state. So we often talk about water sensors. We certainly lead with property rights, making sure that folks' property rights are protected. That not only includes farmers and ranchers on eminent domain against fossil fuel projects, but it also means tribes getting their land back to protect their sovereign rights. So we really try to connect the heart to folks' voters. Voters are voting with their gut, and they're voting with their heart. And certainly Democrats love our facts and our policy papers. But when you talk to people about protecting their homes, protecting their sense of place, and connecting that to their cultural identity, that's what we try to do, and it's very effective. In Nebraska, we started with 500 Dems elected in 2016. We have over 900 elected now. All of those wins are down ballot. So public power boards, state ledge, county commissions, and that's where the action is, right? Because on energy issues, zoning, decommissioning, eminent domain, these are all at state level. And so that would be my best advice.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Oh, go ahead.
No? Yeah? Go on with the question? Okay. So next one I'm going to direct to Lori. What do you see as the key messages to turn out climate and environmental justice voters?
I want to build off of what Jane said, because I do think it's really important to connect with people and where they are and what they're experiencing and what that real life what they are dealing with in their day-to-day lives. And I want to start with talking about extreme weather. This is not something, the climate crisis is here. We all know that. And it is not something that's happening in the future. It is happening today. People are experiencing heat waves. They are experiencing record floods like I just did in Connecticut and was delayed in getting here. And so this is a real kitchen table issue for a lot of people now, right? Where it comes into play in how they're thinking. And we know who is affected most. We know that the frontline communities are hit first and worst, and we need to connect all of these points back to people's lives and what is driving people to vote and how they're thinking about their vote is their personal finances. Now, there's a lot more that goes into it, right? But that is what this election is really about, is the economy and what the vision is on how we deal with this economy or deal with the economy and bring prices down. And what we see is this incredible contrast, right? There is no issue like climate change in this election where the difference is just so stark. You have one candidate, Kamala Harris, who has been fighting for clean air and clean water her entire career. She fought against big oil and got a $50 million settlement because of the pollution that big oil put in their water, right? And so that is up against someone who thinks climate change is a hoax. And he took away 125 protections for our air, our water, our land that he dismantled while president. And there is no doubt, he asked for $1 billion to enact the oil and gas agenda, that he is going to not only revoke 125, he's going to go even further. There's been 330,000 new clean energy jobs in communities all across the country, in communities in Nebraska, in communities in Georgia and Arizona and Michigan, and everywhere in between. In the Project 2025 agenda, his extreme agenda is about taking all of that away, right? It's about putting more chemicals into our air and water and taking away the jobs that are revitalizing communities and that have brought manufacturing back to the United States. So I do think that it is making that economic case, but really connecting it back to what people see and feel in their own communities, like Jane was saying.
Yeah, Frank.
I want to build on that. I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of us have a personal story or an example of how we've seen that contrast play out in our neighborhoods and our communities. For instance, myself, I grew up in Michigan, left the state for a while. And when I came back and lured my now wife from Florida up there, which bringing a Florida woman up to Michigan in the winter can sometimes be hard. But was, I think, even more hard and surprising to both of us than the weather was just candidly that we relocated right to Lansing, Michigan within a short jog of a major GM plant that, let's just say, was on its way down. And I think it's safe to say that when we would knock doors or when you would meet people in the community, more often than not, you're running across someone who lost their job, was on their way to losing their home often, and were hanging on by a thread to have any hope for something better in the future. So fast forward now, I can't tell you how surreal it is with this current administration and our former governor, now Secretary Granholm, to come in just about a month ago in the Lansing, and we're once again at the plants that are now being revitalized and transitioning to build the vehicles of the future, to build our electric vehicles, right down the road from where there'll be a $1.7 billion just private investment in a battery plant for Ultium, and to just see that turnaround and know that how that affects workers, how that affects the community, how that affects our ability to take on climate change. And so I just think, Michelle Obama said it the best last night, right? Like you can just see that hope is making a comeback. And it's real. And I think that's what we need to talk about. When that announcement about, it's easy to say, oh, IRA bill, and they become these short little things and chip. But for the average person in a community to be able to say this complicated worded thing that's called a domestic manufacturing blah, blah, blah grant, this is what's keeping this community alive. And it's not just 700 UAW workers at one plant. It's the other small businesses, and just the feel of the community is different. So hope is back. I'll echo it.
So my name is Ning Mosberger-Tang. First, I want to thank Michelle for inviting us here today to talk about this really important issue, because I have been working on climate change since 2006. Before that, I was in the tech sector. But then I just realized that I have to do something about climate change back in 2006. And over 10 years, I realized that the most important impact I can make on climate change is to making sure that voters are engaged and we win elections, and then we can implement policies. So I think that's why the topic today is so important, for all of us to talk about. I want to share that I live in Colorado. I live in Boulder, Colorado. It's a really beautiful place. I have been there since 2006, but we have experienced a few weather disasters. We had to evacuate because of flooding and because of 3 fire dangers. And one time we had to evacuate. I remember that it was a Sunday, all 4 of us were in the house. We played a nice round of game. And then after that, we walked to the window, and then I just saw this flame outside of the window. It's burning. It's like the trees are burning right outside the window, probably 100 feet away from us. So we are like, okay, we better leave this place, right? So we had 1 minute to pack up and leave the house, make sure that we took our dog, and then we took a few possessions, and that was it. And then at that moment, the police was knocking the door and said, hey, you guys better get out now. I said, all right, we are getting out. So that happened to us 3 times. I don't know why we are not moving, but we just love the place, and I still believe that we can do all we can to prevent the worst consequences of climate change by doing this work, electoral work and policy work and engagement work of the communities, and making sure that things are going to get on the right trajectory, right? And then to prevent things like that to happen to families in the future. And we do want to stay in Colorado, and we love Boulder. So we're not going to leave, but we're just going to be there and then try to fix the problem. And I just want to address what Michelle asked earlier, like the messaging for climate. I think it's really depending on different kind of voters, right? When you talk about, for example, voters in Montana who cares about public land, and you talk to them about Tester, he wants to protect the public land, and then on the other side, they want to exploit the public land for fossil fuel industry development and whatnot. So I think that resonates deeply with voters in Montana. And then when you talk about Colorado voters, many of us care about the outdoors, right? So the outdoors industry, ski industry, the mountaineering, everything is connected with climate change. So you talk to these people and say, what do you think about the future of your favorite sport or your industry? And that would really motivate people. So I think it's really depending on different who you want to message. And that's why the work that Climate Power is doing here is so important, because they're very data-driven, making sure that the message actually get well tested and actually resonate with the voters they're trying to reach. Thank you.
I was thinking as Ning was speaking about just how powerful personal stories are, right? I mean, compelling and scary too, but speaking from the heart and a little less wonkishly than I am personally want to do sometimes, I admit. So I guess unless anyone else wants to jump onto the messaging issue, I thought we'd move to talking about what's the best way for people to get involved and turn out climate voters. We're facing an election, and I think about this, there's the presidential, and there's also, Senate races and county commission races, and those races are incredibly important for how people experience being, governed and led by Democrats, and also just, it's important, inherently important. So any thoughts on that?
There's some like nuts and bolts tools that we all should be doing. So, for example, our party does 93 counties. That's how many we have in our state. We do voter guides for each single county that lists all the Democrats and independents that we've endorsed. So voters actually know who those people are. If you're trying to focus just on your county or even your neighborhood or your city or your small town, it doesn't even have to just be Democrats. It could be Democrats, Republicans, and independents, because there still are some Republicans who actually do support climate action, especially at the local level, and create voter guides and get those out, right? It could be something simple that you're literally printing on your home computer. But I deeply believe that we sometimes forget the basics that voters need. Right? So it's not just about getting them registered to vote, but it's making sure that they know who to vote for once they're in that ballot box or once that ballot comes to their kitchen table. And we are all about creating unlikely alliances. So whether that's farmers, ranchers, tribes, and climate advocates that we pulled together over years of intentional and trust-building work to stop the Keystone XL pipeline and many other pipelines, or now with Blue-Green Alliance type transition work, bringing together unions, farmers, ranchers, the industry to really figure out if we are going to build the next 100 years of America's energy, which obviously is going to include a lot of wind and solar, which is going to take a lot of land, mostly in rural communities. How are we doing that in a right way? How are we making sure that those are union jobs? How are we making sure that farmers and ranchers in rural communities are not being taken advantage of and that they're at the table for real community benefit agreements and dividend agreements? And I think that is where we are now. We have gotten so much smarter as a climate movement where we are not allowing the fossil fuel corporations and the Republican Party to divide us, especially with unions and climate advocates, and really talking to voters now, how do we build this coalition? How do we build an unlikely alliance in a coalition of voters? And the best way that we can do that is start to get very concrete with voters, with voter guides, with talking to your neighbors. And that's my advice.
I want to follow up on what Jane said, but going back to Frank, it's always good to quote Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
And what she said, do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if there is one thing that people take away from this convention about the next 76 days, it's to do something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we have an information problem, right? A lot of people are not getting information from traditional news outlets. They don't trust them anymore. They are trusting the person that they follow on TikTok, who is living their best life, and they're getting their information that way. And especially the younger people are, the more, in some ways, anti-news they are, and the more distrusting they are of information. It is a very big problem that none of us are going to solve in the next 76 days. However, we can talk to our friends and family. We can share information. We can get, I am a fact person. I like policy. I like facts. But the reality is, if we are just expecting that people will get the information from reading their newspaper, they don't do that, right? So how do we get to people where they are? How do we reach people through trusted sources, through trusted relationships that will actually mean something to them and sort of break through the, sort of not believing information or not believing in facts to actually resonate with them and to engage them. And so do something, even if that's just talking to friends and family or people in your community. Honestly, it's the most important thing in these final 76 days.
Yep.
I totally agree with that. I think reaching out to your neighbors, your friends, your family. I help my parents, help them explain the ballot, which I think is helpful. And then also, I know some people will be happy to do phone banking, canvassing. That's super helpful. But for people who are not eager to talk to strangers, I can share something with you. Is that 4 years ago, I started an organization called the Blue Wave Postcard Movement. And we saw so much volunteer engagement this year that we are going to do more than 6 or 7 million postcards this year. And we are just reaching out to battleground state voters, and including Nebraska, actually, and try to get people registered to vote, low propensity voters registered to vote, and to sign up for vote by mail, and also inform them of the early voting time and place and all the information like that, and also send them voter guides through the QR code. So if you know people who are willing to spend a few hours in a week writing some postcards, reaching out to some battleground state voters, you can help us. You can help us do that. Just go to Blue Wave Postcards.
Love it.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Frank and then just brief final thoughts. Thank you. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I think I'll echo what everyone else has said here, which is we have the most, pro-climate, pro-labor administration in the history of our nation. Yeah. And who here believes that an administration with Donald Trump would even remotely protect any of the gains we've made the last couple of years? That's got to scare the crap out of anyone who's an activist who cares about these issues. So yes, let's do something. And let's remember that, we can list all the facts and figures in the world. I could talk about, we have a new report that talks about the manufacturing under Trump, where he lost 200,000 jobs. We've gained over 750,000 with the current administration just in manufacturing. So there's plenty of facts and figures, and our website has a lot of them. But the passion that we bring to voters, the passion that we bring on the doors, the phones, as well as in our personal circles, that makes people want to lean in and listen. And so I'd say, yeah, let's do something. Let's go win. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final thoughts or?
I was just going to say, let's broaden our climate tent. We need to include folks that are living in rural communities, urban and suburban, making sure that we're connecting that we all are going to need energy and food, and there's ways to do that more sustainably and more inclusively. So, and get real specific. Sometimes we talk about climate action, we're so in our head. Talk about country of origin labeling and how that's going to help family farmers and ranchers, and how more family farmers and ranchers at the table means less big corporate ag, and how that helps climate. So start to get specific.
There's also a website called BlueGreen. I'm sure a lot of you know about that. That's where I make most of my political contributions, because that helps lift up climate candidates and making sure that climate is a top priority for them.
That was a good plug. Good green.
There you go. Can we give the panelists a big hand? Thank you so, so much. You all are rock stars, and I'm so lucky to know you.